razor sharp box cutter that Amy gave me.
Oh, and is that your new box cutter?
Yeah,
Hey.
it's very dangerous. Huh?
Joey,
What?
could you demonstrate the butterfly unboxing? Because I listen to that all the time and I'm like, fuck, that sounds cool.
Okay.
Yeah.
Take it around, dude.
And you didn't even cut yourself. That's amazing.
That's the butterfly.
This is audio only, but that sound is amazing.
Yep.
Oh, Jason will use it as an intro. So we're going to listen to Pink Phantom's messages. Or do you want to introduce the panel?
We are. Let me introduce the
Jules
panel.
Participate.
I will.
Most unlikely of villains, schools of pain and forepaws. Does it talk? Does it know how? Does it bottle? Does it meow? Let on the cerebral bore. Has a show and so much more. Release your brains at the
So, folks, welcome to Cerebrivore, the panel podcast. Today we're going to talk about alignment in D&D and other games. I have a great panel assembled today. We have first-time panelist Jules from NZ. Jules, please say hi.
Hi, how you going, everybody? Excited to be here.
Great. We're happy to have you. And then we have some regulars here. We have BJ Boyd, the Arcane Alienist.
Hello, everybody. Good to see you.
Great to see you, BJ. We have Joe Richter of Hindsightless.
What's up?
We have Carl Rodriguez, the Gemologist Presents.
Hello.
And myself, Jason, from Nerds RPG Variety Cast. So we're going to first answer some voicemails we have. We have a couple voicemails from the Pink Phantom. So let's get into those.
Hey guys, Pink Phantom here. I just wanted to chime in on a comment in one of y'all's last episodes about about Gary Gygax saying the players shouldn't know all the rules, and how wargamers came from wargamers, and wargamers you were supposed to know all the rules. That's not really true for all types of war games. The double blind type of war game with a referee, which is kind of what Gary was working off of, the players knew what their forces were and kind of knew basically what they could do as far as how far they could move and what types of troops they had. But they didn't have anything like combat factors and understanding where the enemy was and how the map exactly was. You know, there was a lot of the world that was a mystery to them, just as it would be to a commander in the field. So I think that's what Gygax was referencing from in the AD&D Dungeon Master's Manual. That style of play where the players know some things that they can do and they're capable of, but they don't know everything about their enemy, except for what the referee has determined that maybe their scouting and intelligence has told them about the enemy, which could be right and it could be wrong. And I think that also was part of the style play of the Braunstein style game that David Wesley ran, that inspired, Dave Arneson and later Gary Gygax to further develop the role-playing aspect, because as players started role-playing within that game, as he had assigned them kind of individual people, he also had to adjudicate situations on the spot because the players weren't aware of everything that was going on, and they didn't have all the sets of rules. They just knew what their roles were and what resources they had available to them.
Okay. What do you guys think about that?
Mm-hmm.
Jules, go.
I think the whole how that translates to D&D is absolutely true. You know what you can do. You as a player, you know what your set of rules are, but you have no idea how they're going to interact with the environment around you and the enemy that you're facing, unless of course you've fought maybe that enemy before. You might know something about how they fight or whatever like that, but ultimately you know nothing, because that person, because they look like another person that you fought, doesn't mean that they are the same as the person you fought before, right? Like, only the dungeon master knows that. So you are essentially, as a dungeon master, a referee in a bunch of situations where the player only has one set or one piece of information, right? So it's basically the same still. Like, You know, like I would say.
Yep, I would agree with that. That's great. Now I'm going to throw this to Carl because Carl's a self-admitted control freak. Carl, how do you feel about that as a player?
I don't know. I think that see, I'm trying to think of my experience with games that are like that. But you still, the thing is, you still know the rules, right? So I'm thinking of a game like Squad Leader. If you play Americans or Russians or whatever, or Germans, then you know what your guys can do. You know what they can do, and then there's rules inherent that, like he was describing, like Pink Phantom was describing, that you don't know the deployment. Like they even suggest in some of the scenarios, you have two different, places to put your chits on, and then you don't know the deployment of the enemy. There's a whole fog of war thing, and that's cool. I'm cool with that, but everyone still knows the rules. They just don't know how the rules apply to the enemy, right? So I think, but I think not knowing the rules, I mean, and it's also true. I was saying, even in modern tabletop gaming like Warhammer Fantasy Battle, Age of Sigmar, Warhammer 40K, and I've heard there's arguments happen all the time about this. You know the rules for your army, but you probably don't know the rules for the other army because you've never played them. And I think that works back and forth, but everyone knows the core rule set, and that's what you work from.
Yeah, go BJ.
I would say, however, in Warhammer and in games like that, I think you're entitled to have the other person explain how their army did what it just did, so that you understand. You can hold them accountable for adhering to rules as written for their army. You get to know their army list and their capabilities, and then if you say, "Show me in the manual for your army how you did that," you get away with that as long as you're friendly about it. Like, oh, cool, that's interesting. Probably it's okay.
Yep, 100%. So, but here's the question, and I'll throw this to Joe first. In role-playing games, how many of you, and we'll do a show of hands because this is an audio only podcast, but how many have run a game where the players, maybe they've had a chance to read the rules, but they just haven't, because they're just either they haven't had the chance to read the rules or they're just not interested in reading the rules? Everybody raised their hands. Look at that. Amazing. Joe, any comments on that?
I mean, generally they know the rule. Like, for instance, I just played in a game of Vigilante City and didn't really know the rules, and didn't play my character all that great because I didn't know what the hell I was doing. Now I do know the rules, and I can be a better player now. So it's beneficial to know the rules of the game that you're playing in.
I would agree with that. Any other comments? Go, Jules.
Yeah, but I would argue that you don't have to know the rules to sit down at a table. I mean, a lot of what I do is actually introducing people to a game where they have had no ability to be able to read the rules, or just kind of wanted to know how to play before they bothered reading through an entire manual. Like, it is a lot of work, right, to get to know the rules of a game. So, I'd argue that you don't necessarily need to know. And also, do my players suffer with game engagement for not understanding how a monster works? I don't think they do. Like, not being able to see it from my point of view doesn't hurt their engagement of the game. I think if they thought I was being unfair, that would. But there's a certain amount of trust that happens from like a referee or a DM, or however you want to say that, in whatever gaming situation that is, that we will hold the rules to a higher standard and make sure that they are followed, and that you can trust me to do that. Like, I'm not here to screw you on this, So, yeah.
Yeah, I would say, and especially for new players or players new to a system, or when you're doing a teaching game, definitely, I think it's on the GM to say, hey, you could do this. Would you like to do that? And make sure they remember all their abilities and stuff. Now, and like in Joe's game, we're in book 2 with Wrath of the Righteous. If we have an ability one of our characters has, like your paladin has lay on hands, right? And let's say you forget to lay on hands. Now we're book 2, we're months into the game. Joe shouldn't necessarily remind you every time, right? At some point, it's on the player to start learning how to play. But initially, I agree with you 100%.
Yeah.
You know how Jason said that he was going to start giving me a hard time? That was Jason giving me a hard time. I definitely have forgotten to lay on hands.
Yeah. Go ahead, Carl.
Yeah, I think that not knowing the rule, a player not knowing the rules should never be a gate to letting them play or not, right? And I think that was really apparent when we ran the Amy's birthday game. A couple people never played the game, and we tried it. I hope I did a good job explaining it. It seemed that they were fine, but they really didn't need to know the rules to play at all, right? And I think that's what you want. I mean, as Jules is very communicated very much on her podcast, that's how you teach the game and get it to other people, right? So it should never be a gateway to entry. But it is important for players to know the rules, and that kind of came up in the discussion this morning because the player said, "Oh, we haven't played for so long, so I forgot my player had X, and that could have saved us from a TPK."
BJ?
There are times I wish even experienced players would just tell me what they want to do and let me guide them through it instead of just throwing a die out on the table and assuming. It kind of harkens back to your recent discussion of premature imagination and, do you roll and then describe? Do you describe and then roll? And I think I've seen players screw themselves out of success when if they would have just said, "Oh, I want to do this," I as a DM would have said, "Okay, you do that. No, don't worry about it." But they throw a die, and now we have a 2 on the D20 laying on the table, and it's like, okay, now what do I do? You declared you were engaged in a skill check for low hanging fruit that I probably would have just given you. So, yeah, I think it's. I just wish that would be more players would allow the DM. They would just say, I want to do this," and the DM could say, "Well, here's what you would have to do that."
Right. Yeah. I think we would all probably agree. It's probably better. Players should not roll the dice unless the DM calls for a die roll, because you're just putting yourself in a bad spot as a player by doing that, really. Because like BJ said, I'm the same way. If your character's competent at something, I'm going to let you succeed at it. You don't have to. If you're playing a modern day game and you want to drive your car, unless you're doing some weird evasive maneuver, I'm not going to make you do a roll to drive to the bank. You know what I mean? But if you roll and it's on you. Go ahead, Jules.
But some of my favorite moments in games have been just when people are like, "I'm just going to jump up there and get that apple, but I want to do it like this. And I want to leap over and flip 3 times and Superman pose when I land." And I'm like, okay, roll for it, I guess. I guess that's what you're angling here for. And then they roll the 2, right? Mm-hmm, and that's when we get to explain how they tripped over a stone and fell face first into the ground and hit the tree hard enough that all the apples fell on them. Like that's when you get to have those beautiful moments of like crazy chaotic role play. So there is also something to be said for sometimes rolling for no reason.
That's true. Go ahead, BJ.
I would say back at Pink Phantom's original call, what I was thinking of when we were listening to it was, if I understand correctly, even the Kriegspiel, way back when was it the 19th century when they developed the Kriegspiel war game? And they would hire military officers to act as the referee because the military officers had experience on campaign, and they could say, "That's not how that works," and then adjust the outcome of the dice and everything else to kind of make it a little more like in their experience what real battles would be like. So DMs have been fudging dice for over 150 years, I guess.
No,
not all DMs.
Maybe not fudging the dice, but declaring that the dice are not accurately representing the outcome, and they're going to tweak the result, the meaning of the result a little bit. They've been interpreting dice for a long time, I guess.
That's smart.
That's true. You try. I mean, I think as a GM, I tried, BJ. I really tried to have you guys survive, but it just didn't work out.
We made a dumb decision.
Yeah.
So they're talking about a recent Hyperborea game that they ran, but as moderator, I'm gonna flex my amazing power, and we're gonna do a bonus question here before we get into the main show.
Ooh,
and this is a whole topic on its own. But fudging dice, yay or nay? Joe,
nay.
BJ,
nay.
Carl,
no.
Jules,
absolutely not. Fudge the stats of the monster? Yes.
There you go. Okay, there you have it, folks. That is a topic for another day, but I think that's good enough. I don't want to put anybody too much on the spot here. So today we're going to talk about alignment. This is a huge topic. This could be multiple shows, but we're just going to kind of do the 10,000 foot view of this. The first question, and we'll just go around the table here. In the classic 9-point scale, like you have in 8, I don't know what is 5th edition used for alignment? Is it nine alignments, 5 alignments?
It's the 9 table. Yeah.
It's a 9. Okay.
Same with Pathfinder.
Okay.
Mhm.
So in the classic 9-point scale, what is your alignment, Jules?
I would love to say something cool, like I'm chaotic neutral or something like that, but I am so boringly lawful good. I just follow the rules. I do what you should. I drive under the speed limit. You know, and even in D&D games and things like that, I'm very rules following. Like that's kind of who I am. Like I will make sure that the players have a good time, but I think that also kind of makes me lawful good too. Like my whole driving factor is to make sure that people have a good time. So yeah, boring old lawful good. Jules.
Okay.
Bleh.
Joe.
Neutral good, I would say. I generally follow the rules. I don't always follow the rules, but I generally steer towards the side of good. So I would say neutral good.
Okay. Carl.
So I would say neutral good also, if I'm honest. I agree with Joe. Right. I drive fast if I gotta drive fast, to go back to Jules's example. Here in Texas, there's some rules that are hella stupid. So some laws that are really backwards and stupid. So I'm gonna not follow them or protest against them. But I'm good. I feel like, live and let live, always help people, be excellent to everyone, and all that. Follow the tenets of various philosophers and religious figures that have been around, that live and abide by the golden rule. But sometimes, since laws are made by man, well, they're inherently flawed. So, neutral good. I guess it's got to be neutral good.
I would argue that arguing against or trying to change a law that you feel is unjust doesn't make you not lawful.
No.
I think when you intentionally ignore that law, that would tweak you away from lawful. But campaigning to change a law, I don't think would make you, would keep you from being a lawful. To be fair, BJ, what of the 9 alignments? What would you consider yourself? Cool. Can't hear BJ.
Did we lose BJ?
I'm back. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
I'm having some internet connection, so I'm having to switch over to just using my cell phone.
Okay. What alignment do you consider yourself, BJ?
Boy. What day of the week is it? I think I'm probably neutral good. I'm okay to follow the rules as long as they're working for everybody, but when they're not, I would rather kind of work the change. I missed a lot of what Carl said, but I think I'm probably saying something similar to him. Would rather change a rule that doesn't work than just flat out break it. But if it's just becoming an issue where it's causing harm, then I'm kind of a beg forgiveness versus ask permission when it comes down to if somebody's going to be harmed or mistreated or done an injustice.
Okay. All excellent answers. Of course, there's no wrong answer to that. Let's go to the second question.
Mr. Moderator?
I was gonna say, yes. How you think you're getting away with that? I think Jason is chaotic neutral. Because he is constantly stirring the pot, even though he doesn't necessarily believe in what he's saying or what he's stirring. He is constantly playing devil's advocate, which I actually appreciate and enjoy and love. But that does make you chaos infernal. Yeah, I reckon. What does everybody else think?
Well, I would agree with the chaos, but not the neutral. I think Jason's too good for his own good sometimes.
I'd go with that.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I will defer to your thoughts there. I will refrain from commenting on myself, but I will go to the second question.
I told you.
Yep.
Yeah. I on the air on the public radio. For the official answer, as far as the listening public is concerned, I am lawful good. What I really am is, up to you to determine. But I encourage everybody to follow all your local laws and national laws. Okay, so let's go to the second question. What do law and chaos actually represent? And we'll try to go in the opposite order this time. So, BJ.
I think that's one I always struggle with. I think good and evil are I think we all kind of have a general sense of what good and evil is, but sometimes they want to define law and chaos as these cosmic concepts, and sometimes law and chaos gets defined on just whether you personally feel obligated to adhere to the written law. And then I've seen even times where they try to make it a personality trait where lawfulness is someone who's very conscientious of social norms and traditions, and someone who's chaotic is not. So I think that's why sometimes we have such big disagreements about how to define the different alignments. My preference for just the way I would like to run a game is where they're just cosmic concepts that are constantly in opposition, and characters have to sometimes get swept up in the ebb and flow and the conflict. But it's not really a matter of, you don't have to pledge yourself eternally to one or the other, which I guess in that sense would make even heroic characters who are maybe good people might be considered neutral in alignment because they're not particularly wedded to law or chaos. And I think,
Okay.
It's a question of, but do you want to define chaos as freedom, or do you want to find chaos as destruction for the sake of destruction? I think that probably then depends. To me, that's then global law is the opposite of that, and that kind of sets the nature of that conflict.
I think that's a good answer. Next, we'll go to, I don't remember if Carl or Joe went, so I'll go to Joe and then Carl because it's the order on my screen. Sorry.
So yeah, I think I tend to think about law and chaos on like a cosmic scale as well. Like the law is the fact that we have stars, planets, galaxies, universes. The chaos is the fact that it's all expanding and eventually will tear apart and then come back to law where it's all just flat and smooth. And that's the eternal cosmic struggle. Now, when you bring that down to like the smaller scale level on the planets with individual people, I don't know if it goes one to one like that, right? Because these are cosmic themes well beyond the minds of mortals. But yeah, on the human scale, I think about it more as law is, a set of traditions, norms, rules, whatever, and chaos is chaos. It's the wild, it's the ocean, it's the forest fires, it's chaos, and it's not a destructive force to be destructive. It just is what it is. It's just wild and free and crazy, and law is more like rigid and civilization, and yeah, chaos is more the wild stuff.
Carl?
Yeah, I'm kind of with Joe. Like when you think about it on a cosmic scale, chaos is like the drive towards entropy, whereas the opposite being order is organization, and that's what law fights, is against the drive towards entropy. And I guess what I think was confounded though is if you look at Moorcock, and maybe I'm remembering it wrong, but I feel like Moorcock kind of put chaos with evil and law with good in a way, because you have the different types of gods that represent those cosmic forces. But then other authors like Zelazny, whether you're the courts of chaos or Amber, which represents law and order, there's evil on both sides and there's good on both sides. So it's pretty interesting how literature then takes those concepts of order and chaos, entropy, and the fight against it, and puts them into like terms of morality. And I think that's where I think I have problems in kind of looking at law versus chaos because of that, because our D&D training suggests that chaos, humanoids that live out on the fringes of society and cause destruction, and they're evil. But are they really? Are they just trying to survive? Right. Whereas law is like civilization. So it's kind of, it's like, are we talking Burroughs, or Lord of the or Goldman and Lord of the Flies, Burroughs and Tarzan, or Goldman and Lord of the Flies, right? So, it's, to me, it's always very confusing. So, I generally I don't maybe like alignments, and that law versus chaos because of that.
Okay. I think, especially with modern gamers, I think that's, and I know, Carl, you've been gaming for a long time. I'm not saying that as a slight, but I think a lot of people, especially coming into the hobby that haven't read a lot of the books, are definitely along that theme, that theme. Jules, before I go, I need to let you go.
Yeah, so I have an interesting kind of bringing into chaos. I don't know if anybody here or out there has listened to Fate of Eisen, the podcast, and this definitely isn't me trying to market it, but we actually had a god of chaos in the game, and the god of chaos had a demon of chaos who basically cursed the party right from word go. So the entire time, every time we rolled a 1, we had to roll on a chaos chart. And so this chart was a chart of 100 things that could happen to us. And none of them were particularly bad, or some of them were destructive and some of them were bad for us, right? But some of them were also very good. We would receive the full effects of a long rest as one of the things that is on there, so it's not all about destruction or evil or, anything like that. Chaos was almost a neutrality of chaos. It was more the possibility that anything could happen and that it would be random as to when it happened. It didn't have any rules about what would happen in what situation. Anything could happen in any situation. It would all just come down to a roll of the dice, which is pure chaos, right? So that's kind of where I sit on what chaos is. It's not evil or good. It is random. It is the unexpected. It is a myriad of possibilities in that space. Whereas lore for me is knowing what's going to happen when you go into a situation. Lore is when I swing this will happen. An action and an expected outcome. And we also had and I'm thinking of this very much from a gamer point of view, on what lore and chaos is. It's the idea of do you align yourself with a faction? Do you align yourself with a god? And their things and their restrictions they have around that. That to me would be lore. Whether you are with a faction that is outside of the lawfulness, so we were part of the resistance, which technically was part of the chaos fighting against the law of the land right there, but we didn't approve of that law. So, but we were still fighting within a law. A system, a set of rules. We were fighting against a certain person and only against them and protecting everybody else. That still makes us fairly lawful, right? So, I don't know, being chaotic. One of my characters is chaotic. For me, I played that as you didn't know whether I was likely to talk to that person, run away from that person, or attack that person at any given time. And sometimes I literally would let that come down to the roll of the dice to decide as to what I would do in that moment. And that for me is where pure chaos and lawfulness live. Yeah, if that helps explain my brain.
No, I think it does. So I'm going to come down a much more traditionalist point of view here. To me, the law and chaos, I go very much with, Michael Moorcock, with Paul Anderson. When you look at the, is it Three Dragons, or Three Hearts, Three Dragons, or with F. Paul Wilson with the Keep and the Adversary series, which are the Repairman Jack series. I don't know if everybody's read those, but the idea that you have these two opposing forces and people may align themselves with them. Chaos is very much against humanity. It's for entropy, and law isn't necessarily for humanity, but it's not against humanity. So neither one really cares about humanity, but chaos is actually against humanity, and law, is kind of against that. And that's kind of the way they looked at it. Because in the early war games, where D&D, where you see it, and like Chainmail, the idea is you have to be part of a faction, to build armies. And so chaos was one side and law was one side. Neutral could be on either army. And that was kind of where they initially came from. Now, the other interesting thing I will go, and this kind of goes what Jules said, is in a recent episode of Confessions of Wee Timmer Spooshy by our buddy Minion, also known as Rob. This is episode on August 12th called Reading the Runes, Reaching for Illumination. He talks about 13th Age. And I've played one game at 13th Age. I haven't really read the rules. But in 13th Age, you have these icons in there, and each character has relationships with the icons, and that takes the place of alignment. And it's kind of the idea that your relation to the different factions replaces alignment, which is kind of interesting. And that may be a better way for modern, if you're not going to, not that you have to read any of these old books, but if you're not coming from that kind of place and building that into your world, then maybe the faction play and alignment with the factions makes more sense. Of course, at that point, and so I'm going to throw another bonus question in here. At that point, alignment languages don't make any sense. And I don't know Jules, are there alignment languages in 5e?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, there are. Okay, so they're still in the game.
But there's not a lot of reference to alignment in 5e. In fact, a lot of DMs will actually say it's not actually important, or you'll figure it out as you play the character what your alignment is. And that's interesting too, that we've gone so far the other way from it being a crucial part of your character creation to like being like a box you can skip, essentially.
Right, because in some of the old books that, like in Appendix N, characters, when they aligned with one of these forces, one of these alignments, one of these factions, they would actually, the alignment language would form in their head. And if they did something to change themselves from the alignment, they would lose knowledge of that language, actually. And so it was actually a built-in, like a, like that cosmic force kind of thing, like a cosmic alignment, which is different than modern D&D.
They've linked that to backstories. So now your backstory can kind of determine your alignment as well as your languages, so those sort of things. Yeah.
Cool. So my question for you guys are, alignment languages is in, there's a language for lawful good, language for lawful neutral, language, for each alignment. Do you guys use that in your games? Jules?
Nope.
Okay. Carl?
No, I think it's silly to me.
Joe, if I can remember your name.
I don't. I used to think it was silly. Then I heard Daniel talk about it, and he read some stuff from some books. I forget which books, and then I was like, oh, that's kind of awesome. But no, I don't use it. But I no longer think it's as silly as I used to.
Right, and that's kind of what I'm referring to. I'll put it in the show notes, folks. If you look in the show notes, you'll see the episode of Bandits Keep, where Daniel Norton of the Bandits Keep Media Empire talks about alignment language, and he reads some quotes from books. That thing I was talking about where, depending on what faction you're with, cosmic faction, you automatically know that language. BJ?
No, I haven't ever used it.
Okay, there we go. Alignment languages are out, folks. We see that. Okay, let's go to our next. Oh, go ahead, Joe.
Triple bonus question to the OSE players: Are alignment languages in OSE?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, rules is written, they are, because it's just BX.
Right.
It's literally the rules of BX. But even in my OSE games, I just kind of ignore them.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just a weird concept. I was just thinking of, where law versus chaos is huge. It's like Warhammer 40K and Warhammer Old World, right? But it's law is like the Empire, dwarves, elves, right? And then chaos is you fight against corruption. And I guess it seems more or less straightforward, but then it's not, it doesn't really, I guess my point is it doesn't really like sync with good versus evil, right? Because if you're going to, as in Warhammer Fantasy, especially if you're a witch hunter and you're just going to kill mutants right away, no matter what, without any, what are you good or evil? Does it sync? I don't think it syncs. Anyway.
BJ?
I think in Warhammer, both in 40K and in classic fantasy Warhammer, it's there, but you got to read deep and you got to really think about it. And I think a lot of people miss that idea that the world under the Empire, whether you're talking about 40K or is fairly oppressive, particularly if you're kind of just a commoner. And yeah, maybe these chaos gods like Slanesh and Nurgle and stuff, they seem disgusting and scary, but hey, they're going to help me out when all the Empire cares about are my taxes. They're the ones who might show up and help me a little bit in this life. And so, yeah, maybe I'll sell my soul for that.
Jules?
Yeah, in our world, the god of chaos actually came back with a brand new chaos chart with amazingly good things, like a lot of like they'd saved up all the bad chaos that we had rolled the entire 4 years and came back with some good stuff for us to defeat the other gods. So that was pretty sick. But what I originally was asking was, in terms of alignment language, how do you role play just losing a language? Like, so, like, yes, you role play a descent into a different alignment or an ascent into a different alignment, right? Like, I get how that would play out because those transformations are kind of awesome when they play. But like, how do you just forget a language?
Well,
like,
so, Joe, do you want to field that, or you want me to?
Yeah, I think we were probably going to say the same thing, so you can go.
So, and again, I'll refer you to the episode from Daniel that I'm going to link in the show notes. I'll send it to you right after the show, Jules.
Cool.
But effectively, in that book series, the gods enabled the people to know the language,
right.
so the language just faded from the brain. Is the idea? Or when they switched alignment, they automatically knew it because it was the deities inputted that language in them. Was the idea, Carl?
What if you're an atheist in that world? You can't talk to anyone.
So let's be honest. If you're an atheist in a D&D world, you're just insane, right? Because I mean, it's obvious they're deities.
Jason, I will refer to you to Fate of Eisen Book 2, where gods do not exist. So look out for that happening.
There we go. But that's a little bit different. I guess in a world where deities do actively empower their clerics to do things, and you see their powers every day, it's kind of hard to think gods don't exist, right? It's I guess
or in Lankmar, it's even stranger, right? Because there's no clerics, right? But there's cults of different gods, sure, but they're all patrons, and they're not esoteric. They're like there, right? The gods of Lankmar, which is interesting. Yeah, I know it's very interesting to me. But I believe like in cult languages or in church languages, like a particular church has a language, but I don't know if I get alignment languages. I don't.
Okay, Jules?
We probably need to move on, but I just want to say now I really have a burning desire to play an atheist character in a very actively God-filled world. To just be like, no, don't see it. Probably just like a weird blinding light thing that happened.
Well, yeah, maybe I could see playing an agnostic character, right? But I don't know if the atheist fits. But BJ had something to say.
I was going to say, I think the original idea behind the alignment languages were because alignment was kind of a religion. Because originally, Gygax's original, they didn't have gods. Their alignment was kind of their religion, and so the alignment languages are supposed to be like Latin and ancient Hebrew and Sanskrit and stuff like that. But one way it just occurs to me you could make it work is not so much that you can speak a language of alignment, but that you can understand extraplanar creatures who speak that alignment. When no one else, an angel shows up and it's talking to you, and you're the only one. Everybody else is like, "What's it saying?" And you're like, "I understood every word of that because I'm aligned with this particular alignment." Or you see it written on a wall or on a page, and you just kind of know what it says, even though you couldn't write it yourself or speak it yourself. I mean, you could do it a little more subtly like that.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot more sense than the idea that Joe's character and my character can talk to each other because we're both chaotic neutral, but nobody else can understand what we're saying. We're using hand signals. And so I think what BJ just said makes a lot of sense. That you can understand the extraplanar creatures or read the texts or the holy scriptures and stuff. Yeah, I think that makes sense.
But then 3.0, they just made that celestial or devil talk or demonic or abyssal, I guess, right?
But
they just codified that. They codified all that. They made it an actual language instead of vague. But I think the earlier incarnations, they wanted to keep it simple. They probably didn't want to get into the controversy, even though they did. Kind of fell back into controversy about being associated with religion or anti-religion. So they probably try to make it, law versus chaos as opposed to good versus evil, opposed to making everything a sort of a monotheistic world. There's a lot of things that they did to try to make it more palatable and less controversial, more fantasy, and less like grounded in reality. I think that was probably a design choice as well.
Yeah, but very possibly. Yeah. But I think as we heard Gadget there as Carl was talking, I think it's time to move on to the next question. So,
Thanks, Gadget.
yep, she's a good girl. So, which alignment system do you prefer? 3-point, 5-point, 9-point, a system outside D&D? And again, this time we're going to go back to Jules for the first answer.
Oh my goodness. Okay. So I mean, I actually went away and did some homework. I'm such a nerd, but I did. And because I was like, oh, I don't actually have a lot of experience with other alignment systems, or so I thought. Because actually, when I started thinking about it, like the movie Divergent, has anybody seen that or read the books or anything? So that has a really interesting alignment system where you basically are assessed for what like job or what purpose you will have for like the rest of your life there. And that is really interesting. I'm not saying that that's my favorite, but I did like the fact that it was more related to purpose than it was to just whether you're good or whatever. I like that a lot. The other one I quite like is Magic the Gathering kind of actually links colors as such to a set of kind of rules or like feelings or what you're more likely to do. You know, like white is often linked to soldiers and lawfulness and that kind of idea. Red is like goblins and fire and, you know, sorcery and craziness, you know. So that one there speaks to me quite a lot. It's not about again, it's not about a sliding scale of morality. It's more about what you sort of identify with. And the other one that I want to bring up, because I actually use this quite a lot to build characters, is actually going to like vices and virtues. What vices do you struggle with? And which ones aren't a problem? What virtues do you struggle with? And which ones are the ones that you try and embody all the time? And I think if you think about characters more like that, that actually helps you to build a rounded character of, you know, like different things going on than more than just I follow the rules and I'm generally good, you know? I follow the rules and I'm generally good, but I am a damn right slut. You know, that's who I am, maybe. Yeah. That's kind of the things that I like to look to.
Okay, very cool. BJ, you had a comment on what Jules was saying?
I was just saying on the virtues and vices. They did a promotional role-playing game for the Green Knight, the movie that came out recently, and that's kind of the core mechanic. Is they have a set of opposing virtues and vices, and then you sort of earn valor based on how you conduct yourself through each encounter, and that affects the course of the game. I'd love to deconstruct it and use it as a way to kind of help with alignment in D&D, but I just don't have the time to sit and think about it that much.
No, go ahead, Jules.
Sorry.
Okay.
I as a DM, I often ask my players when they're building their characters something similar to that. You know, like what is it that you struggle with? What is it that isn't a problem for you? And then when I put them in situations, sometimes I will actually completely draw on those situations, put them in a situation I know isn't a problem for one of the characters and is a problem for another, and watch that play out in a role play kind of situation. And then also XP is, I also give XP on how they deal with when they get themselves in situations like that, which actually really mechanically affect how their character might grow. Which I think brings alignment more into a thing that actually matters in a game, you know, because so often it doesn't really even matter. So being able to give it a mechanical flavor is really important to me in a game if we're going to use it at all. Yeah.
No, that's very cool. There's another game. There's a pulp game. It's the idea of like doing like the pulp movies, like the 30s to the 50s. You know, Maltese Falcon, stuff like that. And it's called A Dirty World by Greg Stoltz. And that all your characters are a series of these values, like, you know, like vice virtues and opposed values. And depending what you do in that game, you might go from one end to the other and shift. And it's a really interesting game, but it kind of is built all on that. So that's kind of cool. But I think we're going to Carl for Carl, what alignment system do you prefer?
Well, I generally don't care about alignment, but if I were to use an alignment system, I'm really attracted by what Weird Frontiers is doing. Is instead of kind of having a law, chaos, neutrality, and throw it away, kind of like DCC in a way does. I mean, it does matter in DCC more than most, right? But I think Weird Frontiers, what they do is like you have a starting point and it's your character's moral compass, and then actions taken along with decisions, help you. And it's called walking the line, and you can go from righteousness to being damned. So it depends on your actions, and it goes back and forth. And really, it has a lot to do like with the types of classes you play. Like for example, luchador will do better if they're more righteous, right? But there's some like Tommy Knocker who are damned anyway. They're like an undead zombie type of character, and they're going to want to move towards more, being damned in chaos. So it does affect mechanically. It can affect you, but it doesn't have anything to do really with good versus evil necessarily, unless your actions become abhorrent to like the group that you're playing with. The kind of the cohesion of the play group. So I think that's a really neat way to do it, and it's simple enough that you can say, okay, well, this action helps you towards righteousness or towards being damned. And I think it's neat that they're putting that Dave Beatty and co are putting a mechanic into the alignment system, which I think it makes it important. It makes it an important consideration for your character. And I think that's what we want. We want these things that are defined on our character sheet to mean something.
Very cool. Very cool. Joe?
I like what you said there, Carl, about the things on the character sheet meaning something. As for alignment, honestly, give me a 3-point alignment system where it's good, neutral, and evil, not law, chaos, and neutral. I like a lot of times, especially in fights, and I want the morality to be pretty black and white in a lot of times. Granted, that doesn't work with Pathfinder because there's an infinite number of spells and abilities that trigger off of alignment, so you can't really do that. But I don't want to have to care about alignment, so I just want to keep it simple because I don't know. 3-point alignment system: good, bad, and evil, or good, bad, and neutral. There you go.
Okay, and BJ.
I think I posed this question, and I don't even know. It depends on the mood I'm in. I think I prefer the 3-point alignment. As of mark down the time from what Joe just said, because now I think my preference for 3-point alignment would be good, neutral, and evil, and not law, neutral, and chaos. It just makes things so much simpler, I think, in the way where players live day to day as mortal beings in a physical world. It's probably easier for players to grasp. Historically, though, I think I would prefer the 3-point. But if we're going to get more complicated, I actually prefer Palladium's old system. And you can graph that on. You can practically take the Palladium alignments and say, oh, that's Palladium's version of lawful good or of neutral good. Because Palladium gives you some examples that commonly come up in play and how someone of that alignment would handle it. Like, would they torture a prisoner or not? Would they steal or not? Would they kill? It gives you some anchor points, so you can look and see how out of these different alignments they provide, how a person in that alignment normally would handle a situation. And it's not just this kind of nebulous, well, what is law and chaos really? The books say that, but they contradict each other, and it doesn't always make sense the way it's written out in D&D. So that's my answer.
Mine was also the Palladium system. Darn you, BJ. Since BJ didn't go into it, I'll just take my turn to cover that really quickly for people that aren't familiar with Palladium games. The big thing with Palladium one of the big ideas here is no neutral alignments. And I'm going to be reading out of the Palladium book. And it really doesn't matter which Palladium book, because Kevin Simbada copied and pasted large portions of the rules throughout all the different books. So this could be from any of the books. And I'm not going to read everything. I'm just going to read it. But about neutral alignments, there's no such thing as an absolute or neutral alignment. And an absolute true neutral person cannot make a decision, fight crime, go adventuring, kill, or take any kind of action without leaning towards good, evil, or self-gratification. It is humanly impossible and therefore eliminated in the context of this game. And yes, I'm into a couple highballs here, so I am a little bit tipsy. So the alignments in Palladium are good, principled, and scrupulous. So a good alignment, principled characters are generally the strong moral character. Superman is a principled alignment, highest regard for lives and well-being, truth and honor. Scrupulous characters value life and freedom above all else and despise those who would deprive those of others. Typical hero is the kind of person portrayed as Clint Eastwood and Charles Bronson in many films. Selfish alignments. Selfish alignments are not necessarily evil, but these characters always have their own best interests and opinions above all others. Unprincipled. This is basically a good person who tends to be selfish, greedy, and holds his or her personal freedom and welfare above almost everything else. This is most of us, really. I'm not saying you guys. I'm saying most of us is most of humanity. Anarchist, selfish. This type of character likes to indulge himself in everything. He is an insurgent, con man, gambler, and high roller. The uncommitted freebooter who's more likely to be a crime fighter because he enjoys the thrill of danger and excitement than any cause. And then your evil alignments are miscreant, aberrant, and diabolic. Miscreant, self-serving, unscrupulous character is only out for himself. Power, glory, wealth, position, anything else that make his life more comfortable, pleasurable is his goal. Aberrant. The cliche, there's no honor among thieves, is false when dealing with the aberrant character. This is a person who's driven to attain his goals through force, power, and intimidation, yet the aberrant person stands apart from other evil characters because his own personal code of ethics, although twisted by the standards of good, is one he lives by. He expects loyalty from his minions, punishing disloyalty and treachery with a swift, merciful death. Aberrant person will always keep his word of honor and uphold any bargains. And then last we have, that was aberrant. Last we have diabolic. This is the category where megalomaniacs, violent, and most despicable characters fall. The cruel, brutal killer who trusts no one and has no value for any life other than his own. So that is my preferred alignment system as well, BJ. I really like what Palladium has done with that. And I think it makes more sense and is more relatable. Because what's true neutral in D&D, honestly? I mean, a druid, true neutral. I mean, because, does that mean as soon as the humans have won, as soon as the humans outnumber the orcs, he has to align with the orcs so they can now come up to be equal with the humans? Does he, or is he an eco warrior? Really, what's true neutral in D&D? It doesn't make any sense to me. So the Palladium system makes sense. But before we move on, can anybody defend true neutral in D&D? I'll throw it to the panel.
I've always thought of true neutral people as people who they just don't care. They're just trying to get by. And I think what some people forget about in alignment is the humanity, even of non-human player characters. A neutral person isn't going to screw everybody over, but they might if pressure is on, and that's the most expedient means of survival. But that doesn't mean they don't make friends. They don't care about their kids or their family or maybe their neighbor that they've known forever. They might still go out of their way to help people they know, but they aren't going to go out of their way to help people they don't know, because these big abstract notions of justice and fairness and virtue.
Which goes back to the Palladium selfish instead of neutral. So, yep, I'm with you. Okay, so let's go go ahead, Jules.
Can I mention one more alignment system that I really like?
Yeah.
Okay, so I know you guys know how much I love Tales of Equestria. The My Little Pony role-play games. So I just want to tell you briefly about what their alignment system is, because I really like it, and I haven't mentioned it at all. They have loyalty, generosity, honesty, laughter, kindness, and magic. And that is your alignments. It does mean that, like, you take those kind of ideas quite often to the extreme. So like a pony whose alignment is honesty will probably be quite brutal to her friends at sometimes. Do you know what I mean? Like, and honesty prevails above all else. So when you're in a situation where you're like, no, we totally don't have the thing, you know, she's going to be like screwing you on that. You know, she's like, yeah, it's totally behind their back. You know, like those kind of ideas can be quite fun. So I'm just saying, like, in terms of alignments, why I wanted to bring it up is, do we even need like evil or, you know, like bad or any of that kind of stuff? Because there is plenty of games and things like that where we can get away from that kind of aspect of it. Because I know you're about to talk about another question, and the reason I wanted to bring that up is because sometimes when you're playing bad or evil alignments, and that is a choice that characters are allowed to make, that goes very wrong.
So I agree with that, and I will also say in the real world, I'm sure there are people out there. They're like, oh, I'm evil, and they roll around and do well. Never mind. I won't go.
Are they though? I don't know.
I won't say things that I shouldn't say on the show. But
You're not an evil.
honest-
You're an edge. You're not evil. You're an edgelord.
Well, yeah, but for the
Right.
most part, let's be honest. For the most part, the people we would all consider evil don't consider themselves evil, right? I'm not saying there aren't people out there. They're like, ha ha ha, I'm evil and I'm going to do evil things, right? But for the most part, the people, when you look at like, name the person that you think is a vile, evil person, they don't think of themselves in that way, right?
Yeah,
and
he's wearing
especially
a
like in
red hat.
America, where we think like in America, we're very politicized culture, right? So you're
Mhm.
very much, you know, with this side or that side, and one side thinks the other side's evil, right? And I'm not saying pick a side. I want to talk about politics on the show, but I guarantee you, the Democrats that think the Republicans are evil and the Republicans think the Democrats are evil, neither side thinks of themselves as evil. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
and so most people aren't thinking them, like Darth Vader probably doesn't think of himself as evil. You know what I mean? Now once Luke starts putting in his head, it might be different. But initially, a lot of villains don't, like Magneto doesn't think himself as an evil character, right? And most villains aren't thinking. I'm using fictional examples because you know we
Right.
don't.
Well,
But
I think the Emperor realizes in Star Wars realizes he's bad. He's a bad dude.
yeah, probably
Yeah,
yeah.
I'd
But
agree with that.
let's look.
But Vader is about vengeance, right? He's a lot of his driving force, I would say, is vengeance, and he's been wrong, so he's getting back,
He's-
right? So
He's the victim.
Right.
they made him sympathetic at least, right?
yeah.
In a
so,
way.
So let's look at let's look at American politics, right? We don't want to talk about politics, but we're going to do it for a second. Andrew Jackson, which a couple of people here know about. Some people might not know a lot about Andrew Jackson. Looked at today, he's vilified, right, and demonified. But I guarantee you, at the time, he was. Now it was. There are people who liked him, didn't like him at the time, but the actions he did at the time, the public was behind. Like the Trail of Tears was a horrible thing, but at that point in history, the voting public were behind Andrew Jackson in doing that. You know what I mean? So he didn't consider himself a bad guy at that time. I'm not saying that was a good action, but what I'm saying is he didn't think of himself, I'm a villain, I'm displacing these people. You know what I mean? So what Jules
Neither
was
does
saying about
the-
playing evil.
Neither does the internet, by the way, because the top questions are, why is Andrew Jackson a hero? Because I was like, who?
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
actually, yeah,
Battle of New Orleans. I mean, right? Anyway,
Right.
Anyway,
So,
but-
yeah, but
neither
again,
does
I
the
don't want to get
internet.
too. Yeah, I don't want to derail too much. But my point is, even the people who we would consider villains for the most part, other than fictional villains, like there might be, but and people that are insane don't necessarily consider themselves villains per se. Like Capone probably never thought of himself as the bad guy. Capone thought it, you know, and same thing. You know, does the Godfather think he's a bad? Does the Godfather consider himself a villain, or is he somebody helping people and do what he has to do for his family? Does John Wick consider himself a villain? Right, but is John Wick a bad guy? Well,
What about Scarface? Scarface probably
exactly.
considers himself
Yeah,
a villain.
Scarface
No,
is a
but he
great
probably
example.
does consider himself a villain.
Yeah, I don't know. BJ.
I still think one of the best scenes in the. I don't know whether it's considered canon for the Marvel Cinematic Universe anymore, but it's the last episode of the first season of Daredevil,
where the Kingpin realizes he's the villain, and he delivers this
The Good Samaritan speech. He talks about the Good Samaritan.
He starts talking about the Good Samaritan, and he says he thought he was the Samaritan, but he is the ill intent. That's, of course, it's Vincent D'Onofrio, so he can read the phone book and it's amazing. So, but
that's a great point.
Yeah,
because before that, he obviously was a villain, but he didn't consider himself evil. He thought he was helping Harlem, right? His whole point up to, or the Hell's Kitchen, up to that point, he thought he was Hell's Kitchen savior legitimately. Like, he did not view himself as a bad guy at all. So, yeah.
Cool.
Okay, so let's go to this next question. But Jules, I think that's a good point. It's easy to slap evil around, and as players, it's easy to get into the, oh, I'm going to be evil mode, ha 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 ha. But really, real people don't think of themselves that way for the most part. I guess is my point. But so the next question, we've kind of talked on this, but if anybody has something to add, definitely we'll go around. How do you use alignment in your games? We're going to go back around the other way. So BJ,
I don't.
Cool, Joe.
I do.
Go.
I use it. It is a personality trait. Use this to inform the way you conduct your character, and when there's an alignment for an NPC or a monster, I use that as a guideline for how to role play its motivations and its reactions.
That's fair.
All right, go ahead, Jim.
Yep.
I use it insofar that, like I said before, a lot of spells and ability in Pathfinder require it, trigger off of it. So that's how I use it. As far as like role playing and stuff goes, I don't care that much about it.
Carl?
Yeah, I think I'm very much similar to Joe. You kind of, some rule sets force you to use it because they have like detect good and evil, no alignment. They're, anarchic or axiomatic weapons that can damage law or chaos. So, you kind of have to, but as far as player facing or players go, I agree with BJ, right? And probably Joe too, is that just use it to inform how you play as a character, right? But it's not, there's no really rules behind it, right? Because it's just a description of your character and a guide for how you're going to play.
Definitely. Very cool. I'm going to give everybody a second to finish. Our listeners are looking axiomatic up in their dictionaries and all. You dropped some $10 words there. That's all good.
I learned everything from D&D, all my vocabulary.
There we go. That's why high gygaxine is a good thing, boys and girls. That's why you should read the first edition DMG. Jules.
Okay, so I am actually a little unusual here, but I guess that links back to the fact that I don't necessarily go and use that 9-point system, and I very much use it on a sliding scale of how they've created their characters and what factions they've aligned themselves with in order to then use it in my game. So if they pull away from the faction that they have joined with, that comes with penalties, that comes with consequences. If they do something that is in and against what they told me that their kind of morality lined up with, or what their vice struggles were, and then they give in to them, that comes with consequences and penalties. So I very much use that, but it's role play usually, unless I think my cleric has done something to anger their gods, and then of course they get stripped of their cleric abilities. And that has happened in one of my games. It was a shock to my player, but I didn't do it live in the game. I very much brought it up outside of the game and then said that I was going to do that in the game for reasons, but don't worry, we would role play a way that they would build their character back up again. It wasn't trying to penalize them. It was an opportunity for awesome role play, and they were stoked. So that's the sort of thing that I do use in my game. But it's mostly role play. It's mostly story driven, but that's how I play. I'm very not race through the module. I'm very, hey, your character is awesome. Let's delve into it. Let's build some stories around your character and let's go. Let's have some fun with this today. So yeah.
Very cool. Joe, you have a comment?
I guess I have used alignment before, because Jules just reminded me of a part in campaign I was running where a paladin ended up torturing a prisoner for information. And so I ended up taking away that paladin's abilities for a while until she like atoned to the god. Yeah, so I do use it sometimes, I guess.
Okay. So I'll give my answer here. Oh, wait, Carl wants to butt in. Go ahead. Go ahead.
After your answer, because you might even reference what I'm thinking. So go ahead.
Okay. Well, so I don't typically run games with alignment systems, to be honest. I tend to run Barbarians, Lemuria, Cyberpunk 2020, Boot Hill. I tend to run game. I can't remember the last time I ran a CSR D&D game. And of course, I don't play non-Gygaxian D&D. But the important thing here is that if Jules ran, I could play one of her 5e games. I'd play in that. But
you keep saying you're going to.
Well,
he threatens on occasion.
Yeah, but what I will reference how I like the way it's used. So I'll reference the way I like how I've seen it used in games I played in, as opposed to ones I've ran. And I'm going to reference Carl's Dungeon Crawl Classics game because and he touched on this earlier. I really like the way Dungeon Crawl Classics does alignment. It's just law, chaos, and neutrality. But even to the clerics, like if a cleric's healing somebody, if they're the same alignment, they'll heal X amount. If they're neutral, if they're one step away, they'll heal a little bit less. If they're chaotic, they'll heal even less. Plus, if you're healing somebody of an opposite alignment, your god might go against you, and you might get get dissed by your god, and you might have to tone to your god, which is really cool. And I like the way Dungeon Crawl Classics makes that. And Carl knows if I'll accidentally end the recording or something if I try to click on the chat. So he puts things in chat and I can't read them. But you guys are laughing at the chat right now. But I know listeners, you can't see it, but you'll be okay. Well, I'll let somebody read the chat here in a second. But so DCC is my example of how I really like the way it's used in the game, because DCC mechanically makes it matters. Kind of like Jules was talking about, she mechanically makes it matters. DCC does too. And I really like the idea that, if you're a lawful cleric and you're healing this chaotic character, your god's probably going to, now if it's helping the god's cause, they might not care. But for the most part, if you're healing an opposite god's character or opposite god's follower, they probably aren't going to be real thrilled with that. And that should show up in the game. So does somebody want to read what Carl put in chat? No?
Carl commented, isn't Pathfinder non-Gygaxian in D&D? I hear you're in a Pathfinder game.
I do. That's true. I do play. I do play in non-Gygaxian D&D. That's fair.
You got to be careful.
I would argue it's not D&D though.
It's 3.5. I mean, DCC is 3.5.
No,
anyway. That's a whole
very
nother
Pathfinder.
Podcast.
It is very Pathfinder. It's got very different rules.
Very true. But to be fair, I've played in a second edition D&D game with Carl in the very of Shadow the GM. So I played in two second edition games, which were one session each. But in second edition is non-Gygaxian. So I have played in non-Gygaxian.
Oh, yeah.
So
I do have a question, though, because, both Joe and Jules are, if any class is punished for their alignment, it's paladins, right? They have a strict code. So, I mean, I don't know. Is that fair? I don't know.
I mean, honestly, though.
It's great for role-playing, right? But
yeah, you can punish anybody. That sounds horrible, but I mean, we're all DMs here, right? So but you can just because somebody isn't lawful good or whatever, doesn't mean that they're not able to be affected by the gods. We had a character in one of our games that was they prayed to Sorkamol, the god of death in our homebrew. Sorry. I forget that god of eyes and gods aren't common. But so they prayed to the god of death, and then they did some things which basically took souls out of the world of the dead. And that became a problem, right? Because you can't do that to the god of death. The god of death collects, not gives back. That's not a thing. So, I think the only limitation is your own creativity and imagination as to how you can punish your players.
But I'll throw it to Joe here, because if Joe doesn't answer, I'll pipe in. But is it fair to punish a paladin as opposed to other character classes for not following their god?
Sure, all their abilities are linked to the gods. Same with the cleric.
Yeah.
Most of the other classes, their abilities aren't linked to the gods. So it makes sense that, when you're borrowing something from somebody and you piss that person off, they might say, I'm not going to lend that to you anymore. So yeah, that does make sense, and it is fair.
But plus,
I think Rangers too, right? Rangers and AD&D, I thought were you had to be good or uphold the tenets of Strider / Aragorn, or you're punished.
True, they do, but to be fair, both Rangers and Paladins, and I apologize if I steal your thunder here, Jules, but both Rangers and Paladins start off with a buttload of abilities. Here, I'll be nice, with a bunch of abilities above the other first level characters. So holding them to those standards is one of the balancing points of AD&D. Yet, as a Paladin, you get all these cool things. I mean, they have freaking protection of evil 10 feet around them. Come on. They've got all kinds of amazing abilities. So how do you not restrain them? How do you balance that out? Well, you balance it out by they have to follow this lawful good alignment. So I think
monks also, right? Monks have to be lawful,
right? Jules?
Yeah, but it's not just the traditionally good aligned ones. What happens to a warlock who goes against their patron? What happens to a wizard who, I don't know, loses their spell book? What happens to a sorcerer who wakes up and is unable to grab that piece of themselves that triggered their magic in the first place. I played a character once who fire when she was a child triggered her interest in magic, right? And then she got frozen by a particular god and stuff, and then lost the ability to find the fire for a while. I'm just saying, it doesn't have to always be linked to their lawfulness or their god or their whatever it is. I think there's loads of things that our characters are linked to that we can use to give interesting situations like that.
Yeah, definitely. I guess I was just saying, I think it's fair to hold Paladins to a higher standard because they start off with, like I said, originally it was written as a balancing thing because they start with so many extra abilities. In the newer versions, it may be slightly different, but especially in the original version, when you look, or not the original, but when you look at AD&D, the Paladin has like a page and a half of abilities, where fighters like half a page, right? And like say protection from evil 10-foot radius is like amazing. A concept always on ability. That's crazy. So it
really
makes sense to balance it out. Yeah, it's different now, but I'm just an old fogey. Don't mind me.
Level Pathfinder first level Paladins are ridiculously powerful. Second level Paladins are way more powerful than the other classes. So yeah, it makes sense that they're held to a slightly higher standard. I get that.
Reminder to myself to not piss Joey off in Wrath of the Righteous as a paladin. I'm worried now.
Well, you said you're lawful good naturally, so it should be.
Yeah, that
I roleplay not like that though.
Just don't get drunk and end up cutting fingers off.
What's interesting in 5th edition is the Paladins don't have a prescribed alignment. They have an oath that it's much more like a Palladium thing. It gives you a set of tenets that you have to adhere to, and that if you violate the oath, then you might start losing your abilities. But that's sort of there was a similar thing in 4th edition D&D where every deity had an alignment for it, and the cleric was supposed to be that alignment, but it also had every deity had like a bullet point list of 3 or 4 things of kind of tenets of their faith. And if you're going to play a cleric or a paladin who follows this deity, here's the things you're supposed to be living and breathing and exhibiting to the world. And it wasn't just well, I guess as long as I'm generically lawful good, I'm doing my job. It's like, no, you're a lawful good servant of the god of this, and that's different than a lawful good servant of this other lawful good deity.
Well, that's a great point. And actually, when you look in deities and demigods, you go back original AD&D, different gods have different standards, and it's listed in that deity's description. Where certain deities, if you do certain things, they're going to go after you. And like some of them will like strike their cleric dead if they do something they don't like. It's really interesting. I guess a non D&D version of this, and maybe Carl and BJ played this game. But you look back at the West End game Star Wars, the D6 Star Wars, when you had Jedis, because back then it was the original trilogy. It was before all the crazy things that Jason doesn't consider canon in Star Wars happened. But because the Star Wars really ends with the Ewok movies, let's be honest. But anyway, but that's not that. We're not here to talk about Star Wars. But
only a Sith deals in absolutes.
Why I bring this up is in D6 Star Wars, in the original Star Wars, Jedi had powers and stuff, but slipping to the dark side was a real thing. And it was so easy to misstep and get these dark force points and slip to the dark side that it was really hard to play a Jedi, if the GM really was, following the rules and being strict on it, not being mean, but like hold them to a standard like they need to, and so that made it very interesting to play a Jedi. And that's why most of those games were smuggler games, not Jedi games in the original system. I don't know if BJ or Carl, either of you guys ever played D6 Star Wars as opposed to the other uncanon ones that came later, but no, okay,
no, but I feel like definitely the Genesis, but the Fantasy Flight Games based Star Wars also had that you could slide into corruption if you did bad things as a Force user, as a whatever. So I guess your metachlorians would turn red instead of green, I guess.
Right, and with like, and I don't know about that. I haven't read that, but like D6, even like you use something for like something out of anger, or like you did something, even like not even torture, but almost the point of torture. You're trying to get information out of somebody, like force choke or something, automatically gave you dark force points, right?
Yeah, it's the same.
Yeah, so that's cool. Jules?
Well, in Tales of Equestria, if you go against the tenet of your, alignment as such, you can lose your cutie mark on your hindquarters. I mean, that would be that is a tragedy.
That's the ultimate.
That is. We need to.
Man, there's probably some wild horses out in the forest that don't have cutie marks.
I mean, you even imagine? Yeah,
that's hard. So what I would say is this. Folks, we're going to do plugs at the end of the show, but if you're not listening to Jules' show and the links in the show notes, go check it out. She's doing, she has a solo venture for Tales of Equestria that she's reading, and we're answering the prompts, kind of like a choose your own adventure or fighting fantasy adventure for Tales of Equestria that she's doing on her show, where she gets to a certain point, a decision point, and she asks the viewer or the listeners to call in what they think the pony should do next, and then she does the next part. So go listen to that, and maybe if you're really nice and you give this show a lot of likes or whatever you're supposed to do on YouTube, I don't know any of that, but if you do all the things you're supposed to do, maybe Jules will come on and run a live online game, or we'll do an actual play of Tales from Equestria on this show.
I love that.
I hate to put Jules on the spot. Well, I don't hate to do that because I think she would do that.
You love doing that. Yeah.
I love doing that, but I would definitely play in that game. I bet you everybody here would be happy to play in that game.
I would love to run a live Tales of Equestria. I think that would be very fun.
We'll plan that.
I've also got to run a live Nerds RPG adventure as well soon.
You got to finish that out. That's right.
I got to finish that out. There's lots of actual play happening over on Jules from NZ. So
that's right. Go check it out. So we do have one more question we want to talk about here. And I know, is anybody tight on time? I know we're running a little bit over on time. Is anybody tight here? Okay, we're all good. So the final question is, do you discourage or ban any alignments? And we're back to Jules to answer the question. Or did you answer? Well, we're going to Jules anyway, because that's where I'm at.
I can't remember. But I actually do. I hesitate to use the word ban. I definitely use the word discourage. When I'm sitting down, I work for Questbook, where I'm a professional DM, and strangers basically come in and join games with other strangers, right? Like, generally speaking, that's how that works, and then continue to play with them for weeks. I've just hit a year anniversary of one of my games, which is insane. So when I sit down with them and talk about character creation, I'm definitely discouraging them from evil, particularly. And the reason for that is I'm saying to them, you are a stranger. coming into a group of people that has been playing together for a while. Generally speaking, what would be in your best interest in order to work in with the group is to develop a attitude of teamwork. And generally speaking, evil is the exact opposite of teamwork, even if it is hidden to start with, right? And then they're just going to go steal things from people's pockets accidentally, not accidentally later or whatever like that. But it doesn't encourage good teamwork. It does not encourage game group longevity, in terms of keeping a group together for a long time who enjoy coming back to play with each other. That is my reasons for that. And that is because safety at my table is incredibly important to me. I have a lot of safety rules, and that is why I discourage it. I haven't had a single person go against me when I've said, hey, I highly discourage this because of the reasons here. I think every player goes, oh yeah, that kind of does actually make sense. If the group came to me and said that they all wanted to be evil and they wanted to play an evil campaign, great, let's go. But until that happens, nah, not at my table.
Okay. Cool. Carl.
Yeah, I'm with Jules. I don't think I have to add anything more. I've seen a couple evil campaigns. I've tried my hand at running one, and it honestly, even if they play lawful evil, it falls apart. It doesn't work. And then, I think I love Pathfinder Adventure Pass. I've collected them since the beginning. The only one that I'm gonna part with, box up. I've actually boxed it up. I just gotta get it. It's Hell's Vengeance. I just don't like it. It seems mean. I mean, from the beginning, the encounters seem mean. It just encourages people being mean. So I just discourage people from playing an evil campaign. If they did, well, I would give them my anecdotal evidence that they fall apart. They really do. And I want to run something for people that are heroic, right? And that's just me.
Yeah, makes sense. Joe.
Yeah, I got no interest in running my friends while they're being a bunch of jerks. I'm not interested in running an evil campaign. I just don't care. Like Carl, I want to see heroic stuff. So, I mean, do I ban it? I don't officially say I ban it, but all my players know not to play evil characters. So de facto, yeah, I do ban it, I guess.
So I'm going to throw another question to Joe, not to be mean to Joe, but in a game that doesn't have alignment per se, like Cyberpunk 2020, did your characters still, did you guys still well, I guess you guys did pretty much still play heroic, right? Because they were going after the movie monster killers and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you don't know, Joe, tell people about that campaign real quick.
One of the early campaigns I ran was a Cyberpunk 2020 character where the PCs were going after cybered up 1980s themed movie murderers like Freddy Krueger, Jason Voorhees, Leatherface. So yeah, they weren't lawful good heroes or anything. They break the laws of the world in order to take down these bad guys, but they weren't, going around burning down orphanages or anything.
Yeah, definitely. Go ahead, BJ.
It depends on what group I'm playing with. If I'm playing with the people I've been playing with a long time, I don't ban or discourage any alignment, but I think the people I play with long enough know how to play characters of different alignments and motivations and still make it fun for everybody, even if they sometimes get into a little bit of role-playing conflict. When I'm playing with strangers, whenever I've done a public game, the biggest mistake I ever did, the first public game I ever ran, was I didn't discuss anything about alignment and kind of the table rules. And we had, you play at a game shop, they give you 2.5 hours to get in, set up, play, get out. We had nearly lost an entire session one time from one guy who wanted to play the chaotic neutral edgelord. And he just derailed an entire session role-playing out how he met the party and forced them to sort of accept him for who he was. And after that, I kind of basically wrote a course syllabus equivalent for my public games at But they do that in Adventures League now. In Adventures League, if you show up for that for the organized Wizards of the Close, no evil, no chaotic neutral. They don't let you play those alignments for those purposes. I think when you have people who are comfortable with each other and know how to role play out conflict and resolve it and move the game along, it's okay. But when you've got people who are either are new to playing the game and aren't really skilled at it yet, or even very skilled players who they don't know one another, it's better to just say, look, we're playing a heroic adventure, play heroes. Or we're playing a mercenary adventure, play mercenaries, be neutral, be kind of in it for the money. But you still got to have teamwork, you know?
Right. Yeah. Like I said, I don't normally run games that use alignment in them, but I prefer games where people are heroic and doing the heroic thing. They might be outside the law, they might be outlaws or whatever, but they're, more the Robin Hood or just like Joe was saying, that kind of thing. And even when I ran Wise Guys, this was before I met any, this was like 2018. This was during the playtest of Wise Guys. But those, some of them were made men in the mob, and there were times they did hits and killed people, but they still had honor, and they still wouldn't attack women and children and stuff like that. And, so they still weren't playing bad guys. I mean, they were bad guys, but they weren't, you know what I mean? It still wasn't that straight up evil, joke, they weren't playing the Joker. Right. And I think that's the problem is you get, the chaotic neutral thing is really the problem. When you get somebody out there, I'm going to be the Joker, or I'm going to, pickpocket my party while they're sleeping. And that's where you really get into a problem because, it's just.
Or I'm going to get us run out of town. We're just trying to sleep at the inn on our stopover, but I tick off all the townsfolk. Because I think it's funny and everybody else is,
Right. Carl?
Yeah, I was going to add a comment about games, because I do run also games without alignment or, without, for example, Twilight 2000, right? So, and you have to, I think a lot of it then becomes what kind of player and player mindset. And that's when you have to have kind of like a talk with the players in session 0 type thing where, hey, we're a team, you're surviving together. There's a reason you're together. You trust each other. You fought with each other, so you're not going to try to screw each other over. And I think that's kind of in those types of games because you can play. I mean, the funnest Star Wars from West End to the FFG stuff is playing, scum and villainy. Playing smugglers and stuff. So yeah, you're not lawful, but you're not, you're not a bunch of sociopaths, I guess. And then even with Wise Guys, Amy she loved the game, but there was also this one player who wanted to double down on that chaotic neutrality mentality, and it's disruptive. So,
yeah, 100%. Nobody wants to team up with the Joker. So Joe had a comment, and Jules has a comment. So Joe, go.
It's more of a story. So Jim Murphy, if you're not familiar, check out his YouTube channel. He rules. He's an old dude, goes way back with D&D. He tells this story. He was at one of the early Gen Cons playing in a game, I'm pretty sure run by Dave Arneson, and him and his buddies that he went to the con with were all wearing little buttons on their shirts that said, "I'm chaotic." And so they're sitting down, running the adventure. They get towards the end. All the players, there's 8 people around the table. Everybody goes into this one room, and then a bunch of ghosts come popping out and start attacking everybody. And Jim Murphy and his buddy look at themselves, look at each other. They look back. They're with all this treasure and one of the other PCs. The two of them look at the PC and say, "Hey, we're chaotic. We're out of here. You can either die or come with us." And so they locked the door, trapped all the other PCs in the room, and took off with all the treasure. And everybody at the con was super pissed off at him for the rest of the con, dude.
But
it's amazing.
But arguably that's so. Tournaments are a special thing, right? And in a tournament, that might be the right way to go. I'm really excited because I'm going down to GrogCon. And Jules, I haven't forgot you. I'm going to GrogCon at the end of September, beginning of October, which is in Florida. The Grog Talk guys are doing a convention, AD&D First Edition convention, and part of that is a tournament. And part of the tournament is you're trying to survive ultimately, and it's a single character that wins, not the group.
Oh, that's
obviously,
interesting.
It makes sense to play as a group until you get to the very end, but yeah. So I'm really looking forward to that because I haven't been able to play in an official tournament like an old style AD&D, a tournament like they used to do, like what Joe's talking about. So I'm really excited to play in that. But Jules, go ahead.
As a build onto that, Questbook runs some really cool tournaments where we have takedown Tiamat in 45 minutes. And it literally is just Tiamat lands, go. You have 45 minutes, and we run it as a timed tournament too. So it's like the quicker you can take her down, the better. And you take the prize away if you take her down the fastest. And we had one team come back for a second go, and they managed to take her down in 25 minutes, which is pretty impressive, actually. When you think about the mindset that you have to have, you cannot stuff around on your character sheet. It's pretty awesome. I really want to play that. But anyway, back to my point that I was making. This is why when I sit down at the table, I do a player safety speech at my table every single time, regardless of where I am or what is happening. If it's in a game store, it's in a convention, it's in a wherever, I'm like, hey, I'm Jules, and here's my safety speech. And then the second thing I do is pretty much every single one of my homebrew one-shots, because I run pretty much exclusively homebrew in those situations. I start them, I railroad them just a little bit, and I say, you already know each other because blah. It might be that you are part of the same group, so you haven't necessarily worked together before, but you're all part of this group, so you have like an overriding motivation. Here we go. Or it might be that you're school students and you are in classes together. You might not like each other, but you're at least in classes together. Go. I always have that railroady initial thing to get the game moving, to avoid that whole situation BJ was talking about with like, oh, here's how you know me, and I've got this goddamn 30-minute thing that I'm going to interrupt the game to do. That is a classic mistake. I made it at least twice, actually. It took me 2 times to learn. But I think it's incredibly important to do that right at the start. Of every game.
No, I agree. So any last comments on alignment before we go to plugs or anything like that?
Use it.
Okay. So Jules, you're the guest, so I'm going to let you, I know you just went first, but since you're our guest, your first time on the panel, I'm going to let you go first. Any plugs you want to make?
Yeah, I mean, hey, I'm Jules from NZ. I'm over there doing wee little by myself with some amazing call-ins and some amazing support from people who have supported me through Patreon. So come visit that. But I also run games as a professional dungeon master for Questbook, and I run games for people all over the world now. There's a guy in Isle of Wight who's playing in one of my games, which is pretty sweet. So come check that out. And I am going to be the dungeon master for a actual play podcast called Fate of Eisen, which has already been going for 4 years now. We've been running a comedy 5e podcast for 4 years, but we've had an alternate DM, and I've been a player in that world, and I'm about to take over the DM reins. So I'm pretty excited about that. Brand new cast, great time to come and get in, and we're going to be Twitch streaming as well. So you can find Fate of Eisen on literally everywhere: Instagram, Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, everywhere you can find us. So come check out all of that. I'm doing loads of things, so I'm really excited to spread that good news. And you can also find me everywhere under Jules from NZ, JULZ from NZ, pretty much all over the internet as well. So thanks, Jason. I've really enjoyed being here and these amazing voices on this topic. It's been really cool to actually hang out with Carl and BJ. I haven't had the chance to do that before, so really stoked. Yeah,
very cool. Yeah, I don't like hanging out with Joe either. He's too emo. But
my best friend is Joe. I ring him every day, basically. We talk all the time. He is my bestie. I've never met my bestie, but he is my bestie.
Yeah, I'm kidding. I know that. I'm very worried. So Jules, send me all those.
No.
but send me all that. I'll put that, folks. I'll put all the things she talked about in the show notes. She's going to send me links to all that stuff. We're going to go to BJ next for plugs or final thoughts, plugs, whatever.
Listen to my podcast, The Arcane Alienist. If you're one of the 20 people who regularly listens, thank you. If you don't normally listen, please check it out. We're right smack dab in the middle of RPG a Day month, so that's kind of what I'm focusing on right now.
In fact, I think everybody here is doing RPG Day a month, which is very
Yep.
cool. Yeah. Joe, any final thoughts or plugs?
Yeah, check out Hindsight List if you want. Check out Cerebrivore on YouTube. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps us out with the algorithm. That's a thing a lot of YouTubers say. Other than that, yeah, Jules, hire Jules. She can game for anyone all over the world. It's crazy.
I'm also going to say, go check out, if you haven't listened to Wheel or Woe, you can still listen to that. That's the first Pathfinder 2 homebrew podcast that was ever out there. And it's still the best. The executives of Pathfinder are scared of them. You need to go listen to Wheel or Woe if you haven't listened to it, if you like actual play podcasts.
He's right. When he's right, he's right.
Yeah. Carl, final thoughts, plugs?
Yeah, just go and check out the Geomologist Presents. You can email me at geomologist@gmail.com. I was able to somehow get that email, which is kind of cool. That's all I have. I don't have a media empire like Jules yet. I'm working on it. Yeah, so I feel like I think that maybe I will in the fall, since I'm inspired by all these interviews I've been having on the Geomologist, all these creators coming on and tell me how to get your shit published. It's kind of cool, and I might try to do this blog I've been wanting to do that I've told Jason about called Burgers, Barbecue, and Pho, and I have a rating system, so maybe that'll be coming soon. But there you go.
I hope so. That would be awesome. And I hope you get some of those creators to come on this show. Jules, I hope you'll join us again in a future panel. And
I'd love to.
Yeah, I hope you will. And I do look forward to our Tales from Equestria actual play that we'll do a live session. We'll plan that and figure that out. I just go listen to all the panel members' podcasts, check all that out. I don't really have anything else to plug. So,
other than Nerds RPG Variety Cast, which is one of the hands down best anchorites podcasts in the verse, right?
It's a flagship now.
Flagship, 100%.
No, okay. So, if you say so, my podcast is Nerds RPG Variety Cast. It doesn't only cover games, so be aware. I also talk about exploitation movies and other kinds of games and all kinds of crazy things. So, you may like that, you may not, but you're welcome to come over there and participate. Would love to have you. So thank you to all the panel members. Really enjoyed it. If you want to take part, you can reach out to us if you have comments on anything we said today. At the moment, the Anchor app is still working, so you can reach out using the Anchor app to leave us a message. If not, you can go to the podcast website and leave a message there. You can send an email to cerebrivore@gmail.com. If you attach an audio file, we'll play it on the show like we did with the Pink Phantoms. Otherwise, we'll read your emails on the show and we'll answer those. You can reach out to any of us on Discord and, we'll collate those and read those on the show. Or if you're watching this on YouTube, you can comment in YouTube comments and we'll respond to you in the YouTube comments. So there's lots of ways to get in touch with us. We love listener feedback. We want to know what you think. Please reach out. And if you want to appear as a panelist on the show, reach out and we'll see if we can make that happen. BJ, go ahead.
Do we want a dad joke?
Sure.
I was going to ask if you wanted to close us with a dad joke, BJ.
Does Jules get to help me since she's the guest?
Of course.
All right. I don't know how interactive this one is, but I've been thinking about what to do the whole time to make one up. All right. Hey Jules. I had this really cool game the other day where we were playing D&D, and we had recruited this paladin. It was an NPC. We're hauling all the treasure back from the dungeon, and the DM says, we're just walking along, and the paladin reached over and smacks my character in the side of the head. I'm like, what the hell, man? So we headed back to town. We start off again in a minute. The paladin reaches over, and he smacks another one of the players' characters in the side of the head, and we're like, what's wrong with this guy? So we get back to town and we drop all our stuff at the bin, and then it was like something's wrong with it. Did he get hit in the head? What happened? The DM doesn't tell us. So we take him to the temple to have a cleric look at him, and the cleric kind of looks in his eyes and checks him out and says, "Oh, I can see what the problem is. Your paladin is out of alignment."
That is a perfect joke for this episode. Thank you, BJ.
Nice.
That's great, BJ. Thank you.
Excellent. Okay, folks. Be excellent to one and get another. We'll catch you next time. Take care.
Aloha nui. Bye.
Bye.
A nerd simple broadcast, cerebral podcast. Let's savor all the flavors from the simul straw. The all stars and pods past, cerebral podcast. You're counting down your last as you admire them all. The sound is growing teeth, goes to the sleeping brain. What I mean is this machine's a freak, and from all I understand, now the Super Bowl is coming, and all that's left is the crying and the running. You can bring the legal pile, be above in any order. Just another brain or legal cause of running for the border. Just a snap like a running. Can I stutter? Be a man. I'm respected buzz. All you can eat on a billion, and his doctors never say it. Wasn't saving in the flavor of the millions it created.
And I'm going to cut this part out. BJ, you're a bit late. Carl wants to use the Robert's Rules of Order for the meeting for the show from now on. Go ahead, Joe.
No, that we're just demonstrating.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So no, but just the idea that. So what we'll do, we'll play the calls, and then I think it makes sense. We're going to basically use the topics that you brought up, BJ, that you typed up, and I sent those to Jules as well. And then, but since I'm kind of acting as moderator, I'll like bounce it to each person. And then if you want to, if you have a comment on when somebody's talking, just raise your hand, and then that person will, they'll find a natural place to stop and let you get it. That way we're not talking on each other.
We should do it. I cede the remainder of my time to the gentleman from Seattle.
Yes, exactly.
If there were any gentlemen from Seattle here.
That's true. There's no gentleman in the house.
Burn.
Now,